chapter 14. I came through the portal, color surging around me to darkness. There were stars shining above the tree canopy, but down here it was pure darkness. I reached out to Destiny to sense out the world around me, and I could feel him stronger here than he was in Veodicia, though by now I was stronger than he was, and I was able to hold control of him. I felt out, sensing everything about the plane, closing my eyes so that I could better focus on what was around me. I took off into the night, siring Destiny's power to make myself run faster, give myself more energy. I didn't run out of breath as I sprinted through the forest, leaping logs and ducking over branches. I finally left the tree line and sprinted across a large plain that led up to a mountain range, one of the peaks of which glowed green. Demias Krai, a city that would soon be no more. As I raced along under the night sky, fueled by Destiny's power, I could feel him and I could understand him. We were growing to be more one and the same. I could tell his goal, and I was ready to fight for it. As I ran along through the night, hurtling myself over streams, through siring, I neared the city. It took me a while, but I got there. Not for the first time wishing that I still had the broom or blaze or something. As I neared the city, though, I saw a large white wall that extended for a ways and realized that that was where I was supposed to be going. Destiny urged me to the side, and I followed his instruction as I ran toward the wall. And as I got nearer, I prepped myself, slowing just a little bit. As I got there, I threw myself into the air, pushing myself up. It wasn't as effective as easy as moving other objects was, but I was able to force myself along with Destiny's power as well. I threw myself against the wall and took a few steps towards it before forcing myself up the last few feet and catching the edge. I pulled myself up and threw myself over the far end, breaking my fall as I landed. I ran through the streets as guided by Destiny. It was completely silent as I walked along, and I wasn't sure where to go. The Prophithians didn't often come in here, but I felt like it should have been louder to some degree. I made my way to the mountain on the far side of Demias Krai, to where there were large holes in the rock, mines that cut down into the ground. And I followed Destiny's instruction as he guided me through the mines. The darkness gave way to light as green crystals forced their way through the rock. It was still fairly dim here. It had been mined out a lot. But opening my eyes, I could see my way along a little bit. As I took my way through endless passages, I would have been afraid of getting lost, but I had Destiny now, and I knew that I could do whatever needed to be done. Eventually I began to hear sounds as I came out into a massive cavern that should not have been able to exist. Natural pillars held up this room that held thousands of people, all chattering excitedly. It was the rebellion. As I made my way through the room, a familiar form began to force its way through the crowd towards me. Blaze kind of forced his way through the crowd, and people made way for him, until I finally was able to run at him and wrap my hands around his neck. He nuzzled me as well in response. I said, "It's so good to see you, but I am so sorry." He could tell that I was okay now, and as he let me hop onto his back, I realized he was a lot bigger than before, and he'd filled out, and he had a horn now on his forehead. I said, "You evolved while I was gone, buddy? Oh, I'm sorry I missed it." He whinnied and led me to the front of the room. There was kind of a raised, not quite platform, but a piece of ground that was raised up above the others. And Blaze led me and jumped up on top of it, where a number of other leaders were speaking. And Grant was there. He saw me and chuckled and said, "I knew you'd come, bud." And I gave him a hug and I said, "Grant, you're here. You did it. You came back. You joined the rebellion." And he said, "It's not my doing." I nodded to Blaze and said, "There's your real hero. He came and gave me the same talk that you did. I'm ready to do what needs to be done." He said, "And honestly, if it weren't for the prophecy that had happened a few days back, I'd probably still be sitting on my butt, but I'm ready to fight the Perfidians and do whatever it takes, if not for myself, then for those around me. They need freedom." I nodded to him and said, "Thank you, Grant." And a voice from behind us said, "Humble as always." I turned to see a massive elf from pointed ears, with pointed ears from Middle Earth, I could tell, but more muscular than I had ever seen an elf be able, like in the movies or anything. It was a strange sight. He fell down on one knee and put his arm across his front fist to his opposite hip as he bowed his head toward me. It said, "My name is Othon, my lord." And I said, "Don't call me that." I pulled him up from his salute, and he said, "Then Savior of the Darkened." I said, G is fine. Just call me G. I don't need any titles." And he nodded, and I said, "I assume you're the leader here." And he said, "Under your command, yes." I said, "Well, what's our plan?" And he said, "To attack Demias Krai." As he said that, I looked across the crowd. They're just people, slaves. I said, "Anything more than that?" And they said, "We were amassing an army. We knew that you would come, that you would guide us. We did everything that we could and knew that you would do the rest." I thought, oh boy, okay. I said, "Kate, Grant, I'm going to need your help." And I told him to go meet me at the entrance to the cavern, the one that I'd come through. And I hopped onto Blaze's back and we rode back through the crowd as I looked for specific people, as I found people that had once been travelers and had had their abilities taken away by the Perfidians. I told them to meet me at the entrance until I had about 24. Met them there and led them back through the caves to a point that I had seen, a portal that I had noticed in the rock. We stopped by a vein of metal, and I stopped them and said, "You were all once travelers, and you're going to get your abilities back. I'm going to help you through a portal, and we're going to get weapons to this rebellion so that we can actually stop the Perfidians." They all cheered at that, and as Scar had done back at the very beginning, as I touched their shoulders, I was able to help them through this portal without sending myself through. I sent all of them through, and Grant was the last to go. And before I sent him through, he said, "Thank you." One more time, he said, "You have given me strength, G. Thank you for this. I need this. I need to be doing something and to do something with my life." I said, "Thank you, Grant, for just being willing." He nodded and let me send him through. I kept Blaze on this side, and hopping through, I made sure that one of them was able to hold open the portal. Now that I'd helped them through, they were able to see a little bit more, and one of them was able to hold it open. I said, "Great." I spaced them along the hallways as we went through this Star Destroyer. And one of the men, his uncle, had helped design the ships, and so he knew the schematics. He knew how to get us to the armories. I could have done it with Destiny's help, but I let him lead the way. And once we got to the armory, I went to the lock that was there, and with Destiny's help, I broke the contraption inside and opened the doors. and we pulled out every weapon that we could. We got weapons as fast as we could through in case guards came through the hallways, though they were fairly silent. As we dispersed weapons, we completely raided the armory and passed the weapons along through and passed them through the far side, where we had other people waiting to take them back to the rebellion. We went down to a lower level and did the same thing, and took from another level until we were fairly satisfied. We had a good assortment of guns, some jetpacks, all kinds of stuff that was in there. And we'd gotten it all through and sent everybody back through and made our way back to the rebellion, where there was movement going along, an organization going through, and people getting geared up and ready to go. We went back up to the main platform, and Athon offered that I speak to the people. And I spoke just long enough to say, "You know Grant, and he can vouch for me." And I turned the time over to Grant, and he spoke to them, said that he'd spent his life as a traveler under the hand of the Profithians, and he'd thought to give them power over him. He said that they only really have power if we give it to them, and I'm not going to give it to them anymore. And he said they've been our captors, our masters, our enemies, and we are going to stand up for them. We're going to fight back for all those that have suffered under the hand of the Profithians in the past, and all those that will suffer if we don't do anything tonight. He roused them, and they cheered, and he said, "Let's get the Profithians!" And we all began to pour out of the caves toward Demias Krai to take down the Profithians. End of chapter 14.